Oh, hey mate. Hello. How are you doing? So, I just came here. I just wanted to record the first part of chapter 1 of the book I promised I would read you from Ephraim Kishon, The Fox and the Chicken Coop. So, to be fair, I haven't read it either, so I'm not really sure what it's about. But I took this book from the open bookstore in Jerusalem from one of the street corners, and I really like this author. He's very, very good. He writes satirical stuff, and he's very, very good. So at satire and comedy at the same time. Very interesting. So basically this is a first read for me too, so I can't really recommend it. But let's read it together and let's see if we both like it. How's that? Alright, anyway, let's start. So, Ephraim Kishon, The Fox and the Chicken Coop, a satirical novel. Dedicated in spite of everything to Amit's Dolniker, E.K. Alright, let's start. Chapter 1, For Reasons of Health. I shall now conclude, as time is running short, but before summing up, I wish to make some general comments on the subject itself. Here, Amit Dolniker raised his voice and, pounding with his fists on the table, set the glasses standing there a jingle. What we have so far accomplished is tremendous, but the tasks looming ahead are even greater. Our struggle for political independence will go on. Our struggle for national discipline will go on. Our struggle to increase our security, to increase our power, to increase our might, to increase our strength. At this point, having barely warmed up to his long-winded speech, Amit Dolniker suffered his first heart attack. The stocky, dynamic statesman, his usual slovenly self, had held his audience fascinated for over 2 solid hours with his astounding rhetoric. Quivering suddenly, he doubled over, clutching his chest, while his face turned red, and the veins on his forehead protruded like worms after a rainfall. The audience, taking the speaker's momentary silence for a professional pause, calculated to heighten the suspense, did not at first realize what had happened. However, while Dolniker slumped forward onto the table, a tremor rippled through the audience. From the front rows came the cry, "Doctor! Fetch a doctor!" and several people sprang up to the rostrum. A lanky young man who dashed up from the wings got to Dolniker first and dragged him by his arms to one of the adjoining rooms. He sat the statesman down, loosened his collar, and opened the windows wide. "Please, Dolniker, don't move and try not to talk," he begged. "I'll get the driver right away." "No, Zev, not at all," groaned Dolniker, attempting to rise. "I must return to the auditorium." "I beg of you, Dolniker, don't be stubborn now," pleaded the secretary as he gently pushed the statesman into his seat. Yet when he left the room, he locked the door from the outside. After exchanging a few words with the reporters swarming at the door, he plowed his way through the crowd in the corridor, making the most use of a pair of particularly sharp elbows. Ooh, this is a great sentence. "Bring the car round to the gate immediately," he ordered the driver. "The old man has just had a heart attack." "That nut," muttered the driver. "I bet he'll drop dead one of these days right in the middle of his speech." Dolniker leaned back on the car's upholstered seat, massaging the tip of his nose with the back of his hand, as was his as as was his wont whenever he was tense. Okay? Please, my friend, he weakly addressed the driver. Get me home quickly. They're broadcasting my talk at 8:30. The driver stepped on the gas. All right, Dunlicker, snorted the secretary. Do what you want, Dunlicker. The statements seemed to shrink a little. Okay, maybe I'll devote tomorrow to convalescence, he said. But before I make a final decision, I'd like to glance at my schedule. The secretary pulled out a thick diary from a yellow leather briefcase and handed it over to Dunlicker. Now then, Tuesday, the statesman read. That meeting at 9:30 at the Prime Minister's office can be cancelled, seeing as I still haven't managed to read the secret report, which I lost somewhere. By the way, my friend, did you manage to check the record of my speech to the subsidiary committee meeting? Yes, I cut it at the end. You began the speech all over again in the middle. The opening of the ceramics exhibition of the Anti-Tuberculosis League at 11:45 under my patronage, read Dunlicker. What do I do there? He asked, looking puzzled. The usual, greet the guests, say a few words about ceramic crafts, and award first prize to the piece you like best. Okay, said Dunlicker. Now what exactly are ceramics? Those little earthenware things. Oh yes, I even have some pretty pieces at home right next to the crystal. Okay, I'll wire them greetings. About 2 years ago, we sent a similar congratulatory note on the dedication of the Flora Museum. All you have to do is alter the text a bit. Of course, taking care that all the flowers... I know, Dunlicker, the secretary cut in. This isn't the first time I've done this sort of thing. Zev, my friend, I tell you, the only reason they burden me with so many functions is to drive me to my grave. Then, Mr. Dunlicker, the driver interjected over his shoulder, would you please let me have the recommendation for an apartment now? Zev will write it out and I'll sign it. But Mr. Dunlicker, it would look a whole lot better if you wrote it all yourself in your own handwriting. Why now, that is the tragedy, gentlemen, the statesman asserted bitterly. I have to do everything myself. The sleek car drew up on the outskirts of town in front of a shoddy building with peeling paintwork. Dunlicker climbed up slowly but unaided to the second story. Once inside the apartment, he turned on the radio, then collapsed into a plush armchair and asked in a feeble voice for his mail and the papers. What's new in hospitalization? Came the mellow voice of the radio announcer. An interview with Amit Dunlicker on the state of our health. The statesman signaled Zev to turn up the volume, and appreciatively he rubbed his nose. Yes, he reminisced, that was what he had suggested to the announcer at the time. Not to announce Amit Dunlicker, ex-member of the Knesset, or Amit Dunlicker, former party secretary, but simply, gentlemen, here is Amit Dunlicker at the microphone. The telephone began ringing. Yes, said Dunlicker. Meanwhile, he surveyed his mail again, with glasses to his great pride. To Mr. Dunlicker, he mumbled repeatedly. A. Dunlicker, Comrade Dunlicker, Amit Dunlicker. Mr. Dunlicker, the announcer asked, what is the state of our hospitals today after 20 years of statehood? The situation is extremely serious, came the reply in Dunlicker's voice. Despite the steps undertaken by our government, the hospitalization situation in no way fulfills the requirement of a growing population. Dunlicker wasn't quite sure what the interview was all about. For that matter, he hadn't plumbed the depths of the subject even when he was being interviewed. After the last coalition crisis, he had, by mistake, been appointed Deputy Director General of the Ministry of Health. He has survived that job exactly 1 week, just time enough to be interviewed on the radio. You seem to be feeling better, observed the secretary. Nevertheless, I'd prefer to call a doctor. Be right back, Dolniker. Dolniker, muttered the drowsy statesman. Hospitalization. Madame Dolniker, declared Professor Tannenbaum, your husband's blood pressure presages an imminent disaster. I don't care, replied Miss Dolniker. That idiot never listens to me anyway. Professor Tannenbaum removed the rubber of the blood pressure gauge from Dolniker's arm and put it down beside the sticky coffee cups still standing from the morning on the crumb-flecked tablecloth. Professor Tannenbaum had been house doctor to the party hierarchy for the last several decades and was accustomed to the sight. The creators of the state lived in appallingly frugal conditions. Dolniker's apartment consisted of only 2 small rooms, and as Gela Dolniker was an active party member, she never had time to sweep it properly. The battered furniture stood in a corner, and on the walls hung landscapes in gilded frames of the kind marketed in the streets. Among them, however, hung a beautiful Van Gogh original, a gift from the Jewish community of Copenhagen. Mr. Dolniker, stated Professor Tannenbaum firmly, I'll be frank with you. The least upset may bring on a catastrophe. Dolniker's face flushed and his veins protruded frighteningly. What? He groaned. What could happen? Heart failure. Do you hear, Dolniker? Said Viola. Do you hear? You will die like a dog if you're not careful. Only a radical change in Mr. Dolniker's habits can cure him. If he continues to play the role of a major politician, I'm not a politician, I'm a statesman. From the medical point of view, that's the same thing. You, sir, must retire from public life for a long period. You will have to forego anything likely to cause excitement, and that includes all forms of amusement. Do you hear, Dolniker? Roared Mrs. Dolniker. No more speeches now. Speeches are absolutely forbidden, at least for the first month of your rest, asserted the party doctor. Later on, if we see signs of improvement, we'll allow him 1 lecture a week, and before an audience as sympathetic as possible. Doctor, came Dolniker's hoarse question, how long do I have to keep out? 3 months at the least. Just then something shocking happened. Amidst Dolniker, symbol of the generation of conquest and achievement, burst into tears. Look, Dolniker, Zev soothed him in a voice full of sympathy and understanding. The 2 of us will take a trip to Switzerland for a couple of months and keep in constant touch by phone with party headquarters. I'm sorry, the doctor interrupted. Mr. Dolniker must burn all his bridges behind him. He must retreat to some isolated corner as far away as possible from the city's bustle. But gentlemen, remonstrated Dolniker with a wide sweep of his hand, consider for a moment the country. Amidst Dolniker's rapid recovery will be of the greatest benefit to the state. This argument struck a responsive note in the statesman's soul. Dolniker pulled himself together, sat up straight in bed, and declared, Comrades, I'm ready and willing. Bravo! Cried Professor Tannenbaum, applauding. But Gela immediately silenced him. Stop it, Professor, stop it. Dolniker is just talking. Dolniker couldn't survive a week without conferences and newsmen. Well, I want you to know, madam, shouted Dolniker, that I intend traveling incognito to a village so small that no one there will even know who I am. If, he added, such a backward place can be found at all in this country. No such place, opined the secretary. So we're better off going to Switzerland for 2 months. Can't be done, asserted Dulniker. I swore I'd never leave the Holy Land except on a mission. These things can be arranged, muttered the secretary. The doorbell rang, and Mrs. Dulniker announced Schultheis from the Nova Cooperative just now at 11 o'clock at night. Dulniker's study filled in well with the rest of the apartment, occupying the center of the room was a broad, heavy Baroque desk, piled high with weeklies, annuals, leaflets, and party literature. A bust of Dulniker, the creation of an Italian Zionist sculptor from the early 1930s, dominated one corner of the room. An ancient, 8-branched chandelier, its single bulb only dimly lighting the room, hung over the desk. Good evening, Schultheis, the pajama-clad statesman greeted his visitor. Get to the point, comrades. What do you want? It was again the same tough Dulniker. Even the manager of Nuva, the huge marketing cooperative with branches all over the country, lowered his head respectfully before making his request for £300,000 out of the development loan fund. Okay, Schultheis, replied Dulniker. You're lucky you didn't come a day later. Get in touch with the credit commission. I really don't know how to thank you for your help. Dulniker sat pensively behind his Baroque desk. I understand, Schultheis, that you're in touch with the remotest spots in the country. Zev began to clear his throat, but couldn't attract the attention of a wondrously rejuvenated Dulniker. So, Schultheis, name the most distant and most isolated village. Schultheis threw the statesman a look of astonishment and took a while before replying, in upper eastern Galilee, practically on the Lebanese border, lies a tiny village that almost no one has ever heard of. The only reason I recall the place is because it supplies the entire country with caraway seeds. Caraway? Inquired the young secretary resentfully. What's that? In the old country it was known as Kimmel or Kummel, said Dulniker, displaying his renowned linguistic prowess, and turning to his secretary with a mischievous smile he asked, So, what do you say? I say, Dulniker, that the rainy season's near at hand. So what? I'll take along an umbrella. Excuse me, stammered Schultheis, his bewildered glance darting from statesman to secretary and back. Whatever are you planning, Dulniker? It's a completely isolated village, a real hole in the mud. I don't quite understand. What's the name of this place? Schultheis stared at Dulniker in utter confusion. Kimmel Springs, he whispered. Okay, so that's the first chapter. Those were the first, first 10 pages of the book by Ephraim Kishon, The Fox and the Chicken Coop. So that was the first chapter. So apparently it's about a politician, an Israeli politician whose health is failing, and he's about to have a heart attack if he doesn't take it easy. So he made a decision to move to a very remote village to the Lebanese border so that he can relax and no one can mention his name, no one can bother him, from what I understood. So I think it's interesting so far. I think it's very interesting. I really like Kishon's writing style. It's so simple, it's so straight to the point, and filled with subtle humor. So, but what do you think? Do you like it so far? Do you like this audiobook? Do you want to hear more? You want to hear chapter 2? If so, please let me know. Alright, so talk to you later.